Hey everybody, it's Richard. I just popped in ahead of time to say this episode is one of two with Frank B, where we really go in depth to talk about dice control. We are currently recording our shows on Skype, and Frank's internet connection was not the greatest, so there is some periods where he robots a little because of his internet connection. So hopefully we will be getting back into the studio soon and be able to improve some of our audio. Anyway, here's today's show.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest today is Frank B., a sports bettor, but today he's going to be talking primarily about dice control. He's done extensive research on this. Frank B., welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Hey there, guys.
Before we get to dice control, you have had an enduring relationship with Mattress Mack on betting various sporting events as a hedge against things he sells in his store. So the Kentucky Derby was this last weekend. Did you have anything with Mattress Mack?
Yeah, Mack was definitely in action. If anybody who watched the Derby, you saw him a number of times on the NBC broadcast, that was part of the deal that he had made with Churchill Downs in exchange for betting a specified amount into their pool, not going somewhere else to do it. So he was obligated to bet $2 million on Saturday, which he did. That and a little more. How it turned out was that he lost the 2.4 that he bet. That's because he was betting on the favorite because that's the horse he gave his customers in the store in their promotion. Now, once he announced this, he says the sales took off just like it did for the Super Bowl. If you guys remember back then, he did something very similar for the Super Bowl, gave the people of Tampa Bay, went and bet a whole bunch on Tampa Bay, but in that case, he didn't quite bet enough. He did okay, but in his words, they beat the door down to take part in this. And I hear something similar happen with the Derby. The bottom line is that nobody's getting furniture free this time. Mack had to pay for his insurance, and that price was the amount that he bet into the Churchill pool, less the rebate they gave him, and also whatever it is that you value, all the promotion exposure he got on NBC and in the news and everything. And he puts a pretty high number on that. So, the actual bottom line, monetarily only, was that he would have done a little better had that horse won. But then when you factor in all those other things, I think he's pretty happy with the way things went. So, he did the Derby, and now we are considering what to do for the final two races. That hasn't been determined yet.
Well, the Preakness is only 2 weeks away, or 2 weeks after the Derby, so it doesn't give a lot of time to sell a lot of furniture, if that's the deal.
Well, this last one was about 10 days out that he got going with it, maybe 10 or 12 days out. And this will be the same thing. If he's going to do something, it'll be in the next day or two. He'll announce it. And they really, the sales, according to him, really ramp up as the race approaches, and race day is the biggest day. So he's got plenty of time.
What about, you put 2.4 million into a pool on a horse, it's going to crush the price of the horse. So
you would think so.
What did the final price go? What did the horse go off at?
Well, here's the interesting thing. I mean, you and I both know guys that will not let those prices get out of line because they're going to straighten them out. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So that's what happened. And we consulted with some of those guys, and they said, just bet early, okay? Because this benefits everybody. It benefits Churchill. It benefits us. And we're going to straighten the price out because we're not going to let those other horses become overvalued. And we're going to balance things out. And that's what happened. And I'll tell you what, the morning line was 5-2 on Essential Quality, and it closed 3-1, which shows you what the marketplace thought of what was out there available for the other horses. They really sent it in on the other horses in that last hour.
Huh.
And a long shot ended up winning. And but that's what happens sometimes.
That's what happens when there's exactly
when there's 19 or 20 horses in the race. It's a crapshoot. Speaking of which, you were on this show 7 or 8 years ago talking about your dice control experiments. Let's revisit that. How'd you get into dice control, and why now?
Okay, well, why now is this dice thing, dice influence, dice control, whatever you want to call it. It seems to resurface every few years. Usually, that's a result of one of those TV shows. There's a couple of hour-long specials that were made back then. I think Travel Channel and maybe Discovery. And though after those eras, you seem to get a lot of questions online. I don't know what happened recently, but I started getting, messages from guys I know. Hey, do you still do the dice thing? That kind of thing. I know both Richard and myself were asked by the guys on a show that we go on periodically, Follow the Money. They were asking us about it. So something is out there right now where this is experiencing a resurgence in interest, and it seems like a good time to just go over the whole thing, because there are a lot of myths that need debunking and a lot of misinformation out there that, if corrected, could probably save guys a lot of time and energy, like going down the wrong. I mean, the dice control rabbit hole is a deep one, and you can get lost down there for a real long time if you don't know what you're doing. So, maybe clear up some of the misconceptions about the subject.
Okay, so how'd you get started with dice control?
How we got started was, I say we because the project that we eventually got involved with, I had 2 other blackjack pros and I collaborated on it. Back in the days of BJ21, Stanford Wong just came out one day and started talking about dice control and how that he was possibly a believer in it. And he had some evidence that was compelling, and discussions ensued, and of course debates also, and basically guys that you would label math guys were arguing that this is not really possible and you're barking up the wrong tree, and Stanford would counter with, well, I think that there's something to it and I'm willing to investigate, and I'm even willing to wager a little money on it. So what resulted was they put together a challenge, and Wong had this guy that was going to be his shooter, and the guys on the other side of the bet didn't want to just gamble that he could do better than average, which would be roll 1-7 per every 6 rolls. They wanted a little buffer, a little handicap, which they were given. So the bet was that this guy would throw X number of rolls. I can't remember what it was, 200-300, something like that, at a table, an agreed upon table, which ended up being at the Golden Nugget. And each side would have representatives there to track the rolls and the results. I was one that was asked to be there to track this thing for one of the bettors, which is a guy we well know, the professor. He helps us with the Mack thing, Kim Lee.
Yeah.
And then the other guy was King Ya was another guy on the other side of that. So you had some really smart guys betting against Wong, definitely hardcore math guys. And so the challenge takes place, and to get right to it, Wong won. This guy.
So wait, before we get to that, did the Golden Nugget? How were they reacting to this? I mean, because I'm assuming you wanted one guy just to be able to keep rolling the dice, and you're all there writing down numbers. I mean, what did they think of this?
Well, if you ever hang out in a craps pit, especially like in Atlantic City, you'll see guys with pads there, right? Taking notes, just like you see them at the roulette table, you see them at the block table, for whatever reason. And the people in the pit, they understand it all. To them, it will amount to nothing. Go ahead, take notes, keep tally of this and that. So they didn't seem to care. The one thing that they might have objected to was the fact that when it came time to shoot, everybody at the table had agreed to just pass the dice around to the same guy. Like I declined to shoot, I declined to. So just to speed things, otherwise we'd have been there for a week trying to get 300 rolls in. So they didn't seem to object, and it actually went off without a hitch. It just took a long time. I remember that because I was there representing Steve, and I had to stay there for the whole thing and track all, I think, 300 rolls it was.
That's not a really huge sample.
Exactly, and that's why when the end result was that the dice guys, I guess you would say, they won the bet, and the math guys lost. Well, the math guys know how to accept that one. They had it all figured out. Well, we have a 38% chance of losing this bet with the point spread. No big deal, but 62% at even money is pretty good, So they knew how to handle it. But the other guys, they thought that this was confirmation bias to the nth degree. They were like, oh, see, we won. The smart guys, the math geeks lost. And then that got the ball rolling. Now they had ammunition to further all their side ventures, all their seminars, their lessons, their books, their websites. These things started to pop up. And I truly believe that had it gone the other way, this would never have been an issue going forward. But because it came out the way it did, I think those guys I think they owe Wong royalties, because if it weren't for that, they would have never had the businesses, these little cottage industries that they all participated in. I don't think any of that would have ever happened.
I don't know. So, I think other people would have tried to take advantage of it. You wait a few years, because the same kind of thing. Remember how every few years some guy would show up on BJ21 trying to sell blackjack computers, and immediately everybody would jump on him and say these are illegal and you'll go to jail and all, but it would keep popping up, and
right, there's a cycle to it now, but that was clearly the most popular time for this. I mean, it didn't take long before you would walk around a casino, walk through a pit, and you would see inevitably someone at one table in the pit you could say, oh, look at that guy's trying to do it. That guy's trying to do that. You don't see it nearly as much these days, but during that year or so, you saw a whole lot of it. And it wasn't just, recreational guys, to use a nice word. It was APs. A lot of APs were trying to hand it. I mean, didn't Shaq try it? Was he experimenting with it? I'm pretty sure he was, and a lot of other guys that I know.
Shaq bet against Wong in the initial challenge. It happened that 2,000 of his bet was against me, and so I won that first bet. Shaq paid off, not happily. He was convinced he was on the right side of it. There was a second version of the Wong challenge, which the other side won, and I was clever enough not to be involved in that one, for which I'm grateful. But
so when we say the math guys were on the one side, Shaq's another one. He was lined up with Yao and the professor and all those guys that first time.
So when you did it, did you pay for lessons?
Okay, so the way once this thing started to gain steam and we decided, there were three of us, that we were going to give it a shot to try to examine this. We said, okay, first thing first. We see what these guys practice on, what they train on, and they're basically little wooden cutouts, balsa wood cutouts, that are supposed to represent a cross-section of a craps table. And they have to measure things out. They have to stand this far, the height, there's no rail. It seemed very, very hokey.
Amateur.
If we're going to do this, we need real equipment. We need everything to be as real. So I got a real craps table. I went to one of those places on Industrial that they make gaming supplies, And they just so happened to be making craps tables, a big project. The guy took me into the warehouse, and they showed me, he goes, these here we're making for the win. I'm making a dozen of them. I said, okay, how about you make 13 of them, and I'll take one. And he's like, okay, he told me the price. It was acceptable. He goes, hey, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, though. Because I told him what I wanted to. I just wanted for my house for experimenting. He didn't believe it. He goes, I'm going to cut it in half. It'll come apart. You can unscrew these, the bottom of the legs. You'll be able to take it up and down stairs in warehouse. Because he thought I was going to run an illegal game. That's what he thought I was really up to. I'm like, no, I go, that sounds great, because for moving it, which will happen, it'll be great, but that's not what's going on here. But that was what we did. We got a real craps table, and then I had to rent a place. I was in the market to move anyway, so when I selected where I was going to move to, the primary consideration was, is there a room that will accommodate the craps table with plenty of room all the way around where we can put our equipment, the computers and all that stuff. And I found a place, set it up, and the first thing you saw when you opened the front door, was a craps table. It became known as the dice house to a lot of the guys, because we would have drop-ins all the time. Guys, APs would stop in, they would want to shoot on the table and do a little practice. But so we got a dedicated place, a dedicated table, and then one of the guys is a computer programmer. He wrote a pretty good, at first, dice tracking program. And that one underwent a number of revisions. So with all that, we thought we were set equipment-wise to go. As far as... Go on.
When you were practicing, did you have someone to enter the data for you so you didn't have to make a throw, write it down, or enter it in the computer? I mean, did you have help entering the data?
We sometimes, another one of us would be at the other end, making sure that you called out the number right. But what would happen is your position for everybody was stick left one, which was because we're all right-handed and we're all going to be to the left of the stick man, the first position, which gives you the closest shot to the wall. We also selected a table that is, I would say, the de facto standard in size for casinos. I would say 75 to 80% tables are 12-footers. So we weren't going to go and get a long table and not go get a short table, even though a short throw theoretically sounds like it would be easier. We got a 12-foot table, and what we would do, where we'd be standing, the laptop would sit to the left of us, to the shooter, and he would throw the dice, and then he would just turn and punch it into the computer. The program was on, so he would just put it in himself, throw. That was the fastest way to go about it. So that's how we went about recording rolls. And the target was, if everybody could get 200 rolls in a day, it takes longer than you think. But that was the way we were accumulating the data.
So 200 rolls a day, and how many rolls did you ultimately do?
My sample, ultimately, talking close to a year of this. And there was a breakdown to it. The initial version of the program was just recording rolls, and it was segregating them left eye, right eye, because we needed to know that. But it didn't have a key component added yet, which was to grade the throw, which helped immensely. We'll cover that later. But the collection of the data improved as time went by, and because he kept making tweaks to the program. So it took a long time, and then eventually it had splintered off because we discovered about a month into it that there are two sizes of dice. Okay, and you think it doesn't make a big difference. Like just like 80% of the tables are the same size, I'd say closer to 90% of the dice in use are the same size. They're standard. Now, the other 10 or 12% or whatever it was were actually bigger. Okay, they were a little big. You set them next to each other, you could see this one's bigger than that one. Now, doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when we first started considering whether we even should, we said, well, does it sound popular? It doesn't sound really all that popular. And so, what I always like to do when I have a gambling question that is difficult to comprehend, I like to take an important aspect of it and take it to the extreme. And in this case, you're wondering whether you can control these dice. Say, well, what if the dice were as big as like a soccer ball? Do you think that you could then throw them down there in a manner that you could control to some degree the outcome? I think we all agree the answer would be yes. And then now what if they were as big as a softball? The point is, it's possible to control the dice, in that broad, given that broad range. But at what point do the dice become small that your ability dissipates and then that it evaporates? We didn't know that, but we did know that it made a difference. We thought it would make a difference using these bigger dice, and we started collecting a separate sample from, they all fed into the main sample, but we could split it off. We were using the big dice here, and it did turn out that it did make a difference. Just those little bigger, and so when it came time to play, we did gravitate towards those places that were using the bigger dice. And didn't avoid the other places.
What was your intent regarding hitting the wall? Was the idea to hit the wall or to land just short of the wall?
Okay. So when it comes to hitting the wall, there's a lot of people that will say, well, all the guys that do it, they're trying not to hit the wall. That was not our objective. Our objective was to hit the wall, put it this way, as often as possible and necessary. But the throw that we eventually settled on, and when I say the throw, I'm talking about, you got to decide, where is it that you want to first strike the felt? How far from the wall? And then even more so, what is the trajectory, the arc that you want to be able to accomplish? And it turns out that that's real important, because that would allow you to get closer, a nice looping arc, sort of like, you ever do the peach basket and the softball thing at the carnival? You know what I'm talking about? You try to throw sort of a nice soft toss where it sort of just goes plop. That's sort of the type of throw that we decided would be optimal. And that throw would allow us to strike the felt closer to the wall than what was being advocated by all the experts out there, because all of them, including Wong, were advocating that you first strike the felt 6 to 10 inches from the wall. We had settled on more in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 inches from the wall. And that's a much harder throw to make, because when you're off and you're aiming 6 to 10 inches from the wall, you might not notice it that much. But if you're off and you're aiming 3 inches from the wall, you're going to bang the wall sometimes on the fly, things like that. And it's obvious that you're off. So it's a tougher throw to make, but we found that if you could do it, and again, there's a whole lot more to it than, especially the surface of the table that you're playing on. You want it to be dead down there. But you found that you get a lot of throws that would sort of just plop and sort of like huddle right up against the wall. Technically, it's hitting the wall. It looks like it hit the wall. It's hard to tell if it didn't hit the wall. But that was the throw that we ended up settling on, and everybody was trying to achieve. Now, it was different for sure than what the vast majority of guys who throw dice. They were satisfied doing it further from the wall. But this is what we settled on.
So the idea is the dice would hit 3 inches from the wall, and then the momentum would carry them forward, and they would just sort of kiss the wall? Is that right?
Yeah, on a good throw. Now, this is where the grading system eventually came in, because what you can control 100% is where the dice first strike. What you can't control is what happens after that. Sometimes they go exactly as you hoped, and they sort of like tumble right into the wall and sort of settle right there within a few inches. And sometimes they don't. They land on a corner, they hit something, boom, and they go all over the place. It's the percentage of time that you can get dice post-strike to sort of huddle right around the strike zone. This was the basis for our grading system, our eventual grading system, which was very important because it allowed us to not only take a look at the shooter and see not only can he hit a mark, but how much activity occurs after he hits his mark. But, what are the results for the various grades? When you get off a good throw, we could segregate that in the program. Okay, these are all the good throws. How did all the good throws do? That became very important down the road, because once we'd be able to sort them out, we go, wow. There were times we go, wow, look how much better our results are when we get off a throw that hits the mark and then has minimal activity after a first strike.
Okay. So obviously some tables are going to be better for this than other tables. So even when you get good, there's going to be some places you can play and some you can't play. How did you grade tables?
Okay. So the first thing to do is we got an idea of the range of tables that were out there. And we ended up with a pretty good table, and it's not like it's just by chance. You can create the type of bounce that you want on the back end by what you put on the surface. Do you just lay the felt down? Do you lay the felt on top of newspaper? Some places use linoleum. Some places use carpet padding. It just depends. We kept messing with the surface initially until we got a good bounce, but not a great bounce. Okay, because if we got a great bounce and we collect all this data on it, well, good luck going out there and finding a table that good. We wanted to create an environment where, probably better than 2/3 of the table out there, but not better than 80%. Somewhere right in there. So we'd have some tables to choose from if this thing worked out. So based on our table, we were then able to go out and grade the same shooter on other tables. And it didn't take a whole lot of data to do that. So if we knew what his strike percentage is, and when I say that, I'm referring to the type of grade he got. We call it the highest grade. There's two grades, grade on the throw, grade on the landing. If he got both were top notch, that'd be an AA grade. So how many of those type of throws could he get off on whatever table it is that we were testing in a casino? And we see how he could compare there. It doesn't take long for that particular exercise statistically to say, okay, this one's about in the same ballpark, this one's much better. It doesn't take a whole lot of throws for that.
So you're saying, you're a shooter, and on your home table, you get an AA grade X percent of the time, right? So when you'd go to the casino and see if you were getting it the same percentage on that particular table, and you could tell pretty quickly if you were matching your results at home. Is that correct?
This table was as good or better. Like some tables were just a walk away. There was no, you go in there, it took 3, you go, wait a minute, this is not going to work. I remember specifically going into the win one time. I go, okay, I'm going to go check their tables out. And I don't know. I think the guy in the pit knew me, from other stuff in the past, because I went up to the table, I threw it, and they bounced right off the table. They bounced right over the rail.
Holy.
Okay. I did it again, and they're just bouncing like crazy. I don't think I lasted 5 throws. I go to walk away. He comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Frank, what do you think? Pretty bouncy, huh?" I go, "Yeah." Pretty bouncy. I come to learn later that they had some kind of real springy carpet foam under there, because they just didn't want to bother with – they didn't mind if you went in there and did it, but they didn't want to bother with worrying whether you were able to that you were something to worry about. And the same thing took place down at the D, or it was the Fitzgeralds back then. Their table was ridiculous. You could make it bounce off every time. And in fact, we did. We went in there. I go, watch this. You want to bet I can make it bounce off 5 times in a row and hit right around the chip tree? Boom, bang. It was ridiculous. But that's the way it was. The tables varied that much from place to place. And what you were looking for was something on the other end, where you threw them down there and they just did next to nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And the problem comes, you know from blackjack, when you're out scouting for games and stuff, you find a really good game and you grade it out to be this good. You don't say, well, today I think I'll go play at this lesser place, just because I feel like, I like the cocktail goes there. No, you're going to keep going back to the same game that's to give you the best possible conditions. And that's what ended up happening with this. There ended up being a handful of tables in town that we just kept going back to. So why would we go anywhere else? And
what do you think
basically
your
the
edge
Babe
was?
Ruth of tables.
What do you think your edge was on those games?
That's a whole different story. Okay, because when it comes to evaluating at home, when you can collect a lot of data, enough data that it becomes statistically significant, you can say, well, if we were booking money here, this is what we would have made betting this. The program would tell you that. But trying to take that and transfer just all of that and just make that assumption that everything that's happening here is going to happen there the same way is a leap. Okay? So what we were doing, we were grading tables and we were betting money, no doubt about it, but we were hanging our hat not on some of the variance in results that we were seeing at home. We eventually zeroed in on one specific thing that we thought was as close to universal as possible. So when we were collecting this data, right, so this is a little involved, but it's worth it. We're collecting data. We eventually had 3 big samples for the 3 shooters that were shooting. And each person's sample, when you look at the breakdown, it would give every combination, all the 36 combinations, the frequency, the left die frequency, the right die frequency. And we're going, okay, we're all suppressing 7s to varying degrees. And the degrees were, like, I think the best guy was 6.79. I was like 6.5 something. And the other guy was 6.2 something. And
so
that
means you were getting 1.7 out of 6.5 rolls instead of 1 out of 6, right?
Right.
Okay.
And I will admit that number rose when you segregated just the big dice, which we ended up calling clunkers, the clunker dice, the oversized ones. That went up to like 6.7 for me. But we would take a look at all 36 combinations. Say what's coming up. Well, this guy's rolling. He's definitely rolling more 8s, for example. And this guy, well, he's definitely rolling more high numbers, but he's, and these were things that were statistically significant, but they differed from each guy to each guy, except for one thing that was common, and that was the combination that occurred the least frequently. Now I noticed mine first. I go, well, I'm 3 point this. The average combination should come up 2.79% of the time, I think it is. It's just 100 divided by 36. And I was on on my small dice, I was 2.11, I think it was. I'm going, wow, this one's off. This is my lowest one. And it's off by way more than any other, than the good ones are off. And I go, interesting. And I looked at what it was, and it was the inside combination. It's when you set the dice down, the set we all use the same set. It was the 2 die faces that were touching. I go, okay, that's kind of interesting. I guess if I had thought of that ahead of time, and I had to pick one, I guess that would have been it. Just because it seems that they would have to do, completely opposite things. But then the next guy goes, yeah, you know what? That's my least frequently occurring too. Then the third guy, who was really only in the 6.2 something range, so he was creating the least effect, but his least occurring combination of the 36 was this inside combination. I go, okay, I think we might be onto something here, because think about it. Now, Richard, you dabble in roulette. If I asked you, what's the odds of a roulette dealer starting right now, the next 3 rolls, same 3 numbers? How do you figure that out? And what in the ball,
Yeah. Well, assuming that the first number could be anyone, then it's 38 squared after that.
Right, and that was going to be my point. So when we looked at this, we go, wow, that's really seems like that's a rare event. How rare is it? And when we started to consider it, we said, well, we didn't name this combination ahead of time. So the first one we looked at could have been anything. But for the next 2 to match, it's 36 squared. Had we named it ahead of time, it would be 36 cubed, which is something in the 40,000 something to 1 range. But in this case, it was only 36 times something around 1,300 to 1, something like that.
Sure. But
1,296.
But once you've now named it, you can look at the next 1,000 rolls, and
Right.
but to me, what's interesting about that is what was the actual combination? What was the number?
Well, it doesn't really matter because it's whatever you decide to put in the middle.
Well,
But
but what I'm getting at is, it seems to me that this would be, let's just say, for example, that it was, 3-1. Well, I would think you would get a lot less heat if somebody is betting no 4 than betting the do and rolling, tons of. You see what I mean? I'm just thinking about how to get the money out.
It's exactly the thought process we have. I exactly see what you mean because that's what we did.
Yeah,
that
okay.
was exactly what happened because the inside combination was a 7. It was a 1-6. It was a 1 on. It was a let's see. It was a 1 on the 6 on the left, 1 on the right, and what we go. Well, listen. There's 6 ways to make a 7. And let's say you're shaving off 1/3 of the probability of one of those combination. That's 1/18. Now, if you just switch it to, in this case, which is exactly what we started doing, a 4, let's say you put 2-2 in the middle or 1-3 in the middle. Now you only have, there's 3 ways to make it. You got 9 ways to make a 3 if you chop it in thirds, and you've lost it. So now you're shaving the probability by 1/9. It looks like you might have something there.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the route we did. We started doing the no 4 thing and other, just thinking, how can we use this? How can we use this reduction in the inside combination most efficiently? So that's the path we went down after a while. It took a while to come up for this to materialize because it takes a lot of throws to get to the point where you go, wow, look, we got enough in. It's statistically significant. Look what we found. We found that all these other ones.
Would you have a BP betting a no 4 and the shooter betting small on the do?
Yeah, that was pretty much the plan. It wasn't the shooter was always sitting there and the shooter, coincidentally, all of a sudden his bet size went way down because in typical BP fashion, he's just there and he's incidental to what's going on.
Right.
He's not the bettor is doing it. So yes, we definitely had the guy. We even went so far as to have the guy over there heckling the shooter, because he wants to know a no number and the shooter is trying to shoot us. We have, they would wave their hands, may the force be with you, like goofing on the shooter because they appeared to be in a trance trying to do something. And so we went down that your thought process was exactly like ours.
So now you mentioned that you
Let me interrupt you, Richard.
Oh, okay.
We need to do some commercials.
I love this conversation.
And we definitely need to talk about a video which changed Frank's outlook. And so we're going to get to that right after we do the commercial break. The South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anyone else has. In May, the promotion is half price gas and goods promotion. Earn and redeem $25 worth of points, which is earned by playing 8,334 in coin in. And you receive a $50 gift card for Walmart or Chevron. Limit 10 cards per month in any combination. Assuming you value the gift cards at the same as cash, this means South Point is offering a 0.6% slot club for your first $83,340 in coin in. Sunday, May 9th, Mother's Day, earn 200 points between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and receive a C's Sweet Bouquet 10 of 19 assorted chocolates. Keep your points, limit 1 per player. The 10 retails for $24.50. On May 31st, Memorial Day, there will be a $32,000 hot seat giveaway where every 3 minutes between 8 a.m. and midnight, some players receive $100 in free play. Mondays are senior days for those of us at least 50 years old. Using your points, you get half-price dining, half-price bingo, and $4 movies. BlackjackApprenticeship.com is an excellent site for those who wish to be successful at counting cards at blackjack. They will be having boot camps this summer. If you're interested, contact Colin Jones at colin@blackjackapprenticeship.com. Videopoker.com is the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the Gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get correction on most games. The game of the week is 100 play with quick quads. Quick quads is a 6 coin per line game where you get quick quads, which are 3 of a kind accompanied by 2 other cards that add up to the rank of the trips, such as 99954 or 44422. In my opinion, this game is much more fun to play than regular video poker. I've not seen a 100 play version in a decent pay schedule, but when I find it, you can bet I'm going to sit down and play. All right, we are back to Frank B. Now, Richard, you were asking a question when I rudely cut you off. Do you remember that question?
Oh, yes, of course. So you mentioned that, of course, you kept going back to the best games, right? It's like same thing if you had a whole card. You're going to keep going back because that's where you're going to win the most money. And so what happened in those casinos?
Well, there were a couple that Bellagio was one. They had that were really good. Okay. But Paris had one that was the Babe Ruth of craps tables. I mean, it was unbelievable that you would get the dice down to the back end and they would just like get absorbed into it was unbelievable. We always theorized that there must be some kind of knot of wood down there, some soft knot of wood or something, because never found anything better than that. And I eventually started going there every afternoon when they opened that pit. I was there when they opened the table. Could we make this $100 game? And they agreed to that every day until the end. And this is something that the Bellagio, which was the other place that was really good right across the street, they had 2 tables in their pit that were really good, but they wouldn't move the signs around because they go, oh, there's $100 games down at the end. They had $100 tables all the time. So I couldn't get those tables to myself. So Paris became the Babe Ruth of the craps tables, and I ended up going there every day. Tried to be as nice as possible, polite. They even had a bet that was very, very good for tipping the dealers because you always wanted to keep them on your side. They had this thing called the fire bet, and basically it's if you hit every number before 7ing out, they get paid some kind of jackpot. It only cost, I forget, maybe it was $5 I was betting for them. Didn't matter. The point is that's a great bet because it sat out there until you 7'd out. It wasn't like betting something and they lost it. And they always had a bet out there. So I would go there every day and play, and my results were decent. Okay, like I said, assuming that your result moved from the practice house to the casino is a big assumption, and it would take a lot of data to establish that. We were assuming that a lot of it would carry over. So I was doing okay. We were generating good offers there. In other words, I was getting that because that was the objective. The objective was if we can just erase the house edge, we can make our money off marketing, just like machine guys do. And we eventually started getting treated just like the high-end machine players. I was getting $1,000 chips. I was getting invited to the big events, the tournaments, and things like that. So as far as that realistic expectation of what we could get out of it, we were starting to see the results. But after a while, I started to rub them the wrong way there. And they wouldn't give me a $100 sign one day. There's not enough tables open. We need this table open. Okay, that hurt right there. Then there was an incident there where I had a big player playing next to me. He was betting $500 chips. And this guy liked to bet the don't. And before he did it, he would like apologize to me. He's like, listen, this is nothing against. I go, I know. Please, you don't have to explain to me. It has nothing to do with me. But he would bet the don't. And a number would be established. And this guy loved 4s and 10s. He also liked 5s and 9s. So what he didn't like was 6s and 8s. So he had $500 on the pass line, and a 6 would come up. And as you guys know, in craps, the line bets, at least on the do side, those are contract bets. You have the advantage on the come-out roll. In the exchanges, you got to leave that thing up there after the count because now we have the edge. And you flip that when you bet the don't. So this guy faded the come out roll, and then was taking down his bets on if it came up 6 or 8. So I watched this a couple of times. I'm like, whoa! I told the guy, I go, what's the matter? You don't like 6s and 8s? He goes, no. I go, I like 6s and 8s. I go, I like them so much. I'll take your bet. Just leave it up there. I'll take the action. And we started doing this. He started, instead of taking it down, he would just leave it there. And then if it won, he'd give it to me. And if it lost, I'd give him 500. Now, the pit noticed it right away, but didn't say anything. But you can tell they're sort of scratching their head. They go, wait a minute. I don't think this is working out well for us. He's been taking down these bets that have about $50. And I don't know what the EV was on a $500 chip, but it's pretty good. 6 versus a 7. And they go, they eventually came around. They said, listen, they pulled me aside, just like when you get at the blackjack table. Could you please step away from the table? And they said, listen, we don't want you doing that anymore. Leave that guy alone. I go, oh no, we were just being friendly. And he goes, no more. You can't buy his bets anymore. I go, okay, understood. Because now, listen, I'm not going to start any trouble. This is my place. This is where I want the table I want to play on. I'm not going to start any crap there. So I'm like, yeah, no problem, man. I just like 6s and 8s, So a table didn't bounce this out. I was like, wow, isn't that interesting? So listen, I could keep going on with stories of Bellagio and all these other things, how this disintegrated over time, because I eventually got bounced out of Bellagio as well. I didn't get bounced out of Paris. It just became not worth going. But I got bounced out of Bellagio. I got bounced out of Venetian, Monte Carlo. I want to say Golden Nugget, but that might not be right. They might have just made it real difficult. Sometimes they make it real difficult for you. And by difficult, I mean you were under threat of being no longer able to play on something that was inevitably going to happen. And that would be, most of the time, hitting the wall. Now, anybody who throws the dice down there, no matter what they're doing, occasionally the dice bounce cockeye and they both don't hit the wall. It happens to everybody. But if it happens to you and they're looking for a reason to get rid of you, you would start to get the warnings. Hey, you need to hit the wall every time. Say, okay, I'm trying, I'm doing it. But, sometimes it would bounce side, be a bad throw, whatever, and it would not hit the wall, both dice. And then they would go, when they eventually got to the point, they said, listen, the next time you miss the wall, you're done. When they start telling you things like that, A, you got to pick up and go because you're inevitably going to miss the wall by accident. And B, that's your signal that it's time to leave that place. So that was the type of stuff that started to happen.
Did they ever put you together with the BP, and had you taken a substantial amount of money out of those places?
No, we never caught problems for doing the BP thing because we didn't show up at those places at the same time. We were playing different places. It would look really weird if we both showed up at Paris or Bellagio or one or two of the other places that we were picking on Hard Rock. So we went to different places that had acceptable tables. Because when we went to play at Paris, we were betting the money ourselves. We played at Bellagio, we're betting the money ourselves. We're just betting on ourselves. This is something that evolved near the end. We said, listen, we need to come up with a different way to do this, not only here, but if we decide to go somewhere else. But the moral to a lot of this is that no matter what you're doing, and no matter how much the pit or the casino doesn't want to believe what might be going on, you're gonna get countermeasures if they think it's even possible.
But did you ever get countermeasured if it was a BP betting the don't?
No.
Yeah, wow. So you might have been able to make a lot more money if you had started in that way.
We didn't really we didn't make a lot of money because we're betting green chips, then we're finding a good table, we're betting black chips. I think I made a little north of 30,000 mine. The other guys, listen, they would go out on their own and play too, so I can't testify as to what they made. One guy bet bigger than me, and he would come home and have 5-figure swings a lot of days, and So I don't know what his bottom line was. I just know what mine was. And, it varied. And that was the big problem with this. You never know if you're right. You never know if what you're doing is actually making a difference, even though at home you feel truth there.
We're running out of time today, but we have a lot more questions to ask you. Any chance we can get you to come back in the near future and continue this discussion?
Finish this up on number one. No problem.
Perfect.
Yep, no problem.
Now, when you were here with Anthony Curtis on a Super Bowl prop bet, you talked about Mexican casinos that had this huge 4-point-something% on the buy-in and 9% on the daily net. Is that still going on? That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it does sound terrible. And like we all speculated back then, what's the saying? You don't want to slaughter the cow, you want to milk it, I guess. And those rates were going to slaughter the cows. And that's what ended up happening, because about a month ago, unbeknownst to me, I just checked periodically. I think it happened about a month or 5 or maybe 6 weeks ago. I went and I just asked. I don't know what possessed me to ask. What's the tax on the in the table room? And they said, oh, no more tax. I go, no, because the machines were still 4.4% on your buy-in, and then 9% on your daily net win if you cashed out at the end of the day. Now, if you weren't too bright and you start cashing out multiple times during the day, well, that made the tax effectively. It's going to be higher because you're going to be cashing out winners and then missing losers. But it remained the same on machines, but you told me it's 0% on your buy-in, no good, and it's 1% on your daily net win. Okay. Two things. One, people will start coming back to the tables, because what had happened, I would take a peek into the table games room, nobody'd be there. It'd be empty. The only thing they had anything going was they had a poker room, and they had nightly tournaments. They were getting action there, because obviously that didn't apply there. But the pit was empty, and the people were starving. I'm sure they laid off dealers and everything. So, they had to switch to something more reasonable, which validates what I speculated, which was that this was not state mandated. This is the casino trying to pass on the tax to the consumer, because they got a little bump, I heard, at the end of 2020. They're taxing them a little more, so they changed the tax. It previously was 7% of your net win, nothing on the buy-in. So, and I've checked around. I found a place the other day was no tax on the buy-in, no tax on the win, just nothing in the table games area. You're cool, you're good to go. You can play there, So it changes all the time. They try to take as much as they possibly can without having it turn into some big negative. But yeah, it definitely changed like we thought it would.
All right, thank you, Frank. At the end of our shows, we do a recommended section. Richard, do you have anything for us today?
Yeah, so I did something I haven't done in over a year. This weekend, I actually went out to eat at a restaurant with my wife and son and his girlfriend. It was her birthday. And we tried a place in Summerlin called Honey Salt. And the food was really, really good. They had outdoor seating as well as indoor. As I said, the food was really good. The service, not so much, but, I give every place, one pass on the service, because, every place can have an off day. But I would definitely still recommend it, because, as I say, the food was so good. So Honey Salt, it's called. It's in Summerlin.
You live nowhere close to Summerlin. How'd you happen to end up there?
Well, so there was, in addition to going to eat, there was an art walk at Tivoli Village, and the art walk was terrible. It was like 10 artists with paintings of cats or something. The art walk was no good at all. So, but we went out there to go eat and get outdoors, and so.
All right. For my recommended, I want to tell you about a series of YouTube videos by Michihito Kageyama. who, for some reason, everybody calls him Michi. And he calls it, I kept talking about my match. Michi is one of the top players in the world in backgammon, and he plays a series of matches, usually 11 or 13 points, and he comments on each roll as they happen. English is not his first language, and he does have some amusing expressions, but the key is you learn to think about the backgammon game in a way an expert player does. Unlike XG++, which is the best way computer-wise, it'll tell you how much each play is worth and what all the variations are. This tells you why. In other words, and it's a different way to learn, and I find it interesting. I'm never going to take up backgammon professionally again, but I do find it enjoyable. Frank, do you have a recommended for us?
I have something that I've grown fond of over the last few months. It came as a recommendation from my friend Captain Jack, who is heavily into sports betting, and where I'm at half the year, when I'm watching my sporting events, they're in a different language. So this app, it is called that he recommended, is called Tunity, Tunity. It's available in both of the app stores. And what you do is you take it and you turn the channel on what it is that you want to hear the audio broadcast to, or you do it in the sports book. You can point it at the screen, and somehow, just like a barcode scanner, it takes the image on the screen, knows what it is that you're watching, and then gives you a selection of audio feeds to listen to. You can listen to the direct CBS feed, like when I was watching NFL during the winter, or like NBA games, which are broadcast in, right now for me, Spanish. And you put it, and then all of a sudden I can get the English feed. I can get it right through my TV. It's because I can play the sound through a speaker, or you can just plug it into a headphone that you're using with your iPhone. And it's called Tunity, Tunity. I don't know who makes it. There's a free version where you got to put up with ads. Like every 5 minutes, it's going to interrupt you with an ad, and you got to push it to put it away. But if you pay a few bucks a month, you don't get those ads. And I did find that the iPad version of it, for some reason, the free version on there, I never got ads. So maybe that's a little quirk. But anyway, it's a pretty good app. Even if you're not dealing with a language barrier, even if you're just sitting in a sports book and you want to get the audio feed because, maybe they have a different game on, or you just can't, they got music on like they have at the circle all the time. This app called Tunity will let you just aim it at the screen that you're watching, and you'll be able to listen to the audio feed.
Oh, that's a great idea, whoever came up with that.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Frank. Informative as ever. Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.